So the Battlefront 2 beta may be over, but before it closed on Wednesday we also managed to get a look at the PC version in addition to the console platforms, giving us our first impressions of how well the game scales up on the platform. In the past, DICE's Frostbite engine has proved extremely versatile, being able to run at 60 frames per second on a variety of different range hardware. Whether that be mid-range graphics cards, lower end configurations with reduced settings, or even maxing things out with higher end cards. The result is you get a great experience when targeting 60 frames per second and at various resolutions. And from what I've seen so far with this Battlefront 2 beta on PC, the good news is that this latest installment is just as scalable, and whether you're running on higher end or less capable hardware, you're going to be getting a great experience with regards to performance, feature set and resolution. And yes, it's possible to hit a locked 1080p 60 using a mid-range card, something we will be talking about a bit later. But for now, let's start with how much of an improvement we're getting over the consoles then. Firstly, in terms of image quality, well, there are a ton of options here, allowing you to get the best from your individual hardware setup. The most obvious benefit is the ability to have a fixed resolution, so when targeting 1080p, as long as you've got the capable hardware to keep frame rate stable, then well, you get a native 1080p, giving you more consistent image quality than PS4 and Xbox One. Naturally, the Pro comes out ahead with regards to super sampling providing a smoother image, but on the PC you can actually do this as well and take things much further than on console. There's both a resolution slider here along with the option to use dynamic resolution scaling as well. This means you can bump up the resolution slider above 1080p, say 200% for 4K for example, and also enable dynamic resolution as well. That means in less demanding moments you'll get even better image quality than the Pro, whereas when the action starts to heat up, you'll still be getting resolutions at least at native 1080p, so things never drop below. This level of flexibility means that in terms of raw image quality, the PC can definitely win out over consoles, and yes, on mid-range cards that enables you to push settings up all the way to Ultra as well. Pretty cool. In terms of graphical improvements, well, there are quite a lot to speak of. And like with Battlefield 1, while initially the PC appears to offer up various refinements in a number of areas, collectively they add up to a nice visual boost. Perhaps the most striking upgrade I saw was the increase in physics-based particle effects. Running across the streets of Naboo, the number of leaves flying around the scenery is greatly increased over PS4, Xbox One and even the Pro. And the same is also true of debris and flaming embers from explosions, and there are even greater numbers of birds flocking away from the action. It not only looks cool, but I think it fleshes out the world quite nicely over what's present on console. The other big difference is streaming. Being a game with large open environments, it's understandable that the highest quality assets won't be loaded at all times, and that the game will have to quickly stream them in from the hard drive into RAM. And this means that on consoles at least there's quite a lot of pop-in, whether that be shadows or foliage or LOD transitions between quality levels. Moving to PC, and this is greatly improved. Draw distances are expanded, so not only do we get additional trees, foliage and rocks in the distance, there's also less in the way of pop-in too. LOD transitions occur further away and they're not quite as intrusive. Running through the forest areas on Takodana here, and well, I get the feeling that the experience feels a little more solid as a result. It's not something that really affects gameplay at all, but it's a nice extra bit of polish to the visuals which I kind of appreciate. Beyond that, you get all the extras you'd expect from a Frostbite game running on PC. Shadow resolution is greatly increased, so these elements not only appear more defined, but on PC you can now make out individual branches and leaves, whereas on consoles these appear somewhat soft and quite distorted. There's also the use of high quality artwork too, higher resolution textures and normal maps, along with what looks like an additional detail layer on top, adding, well, extra complexity to some surfaces such as the ground on Takodana. Other upgrades include tessellation that provide more fully featured assets such as the modelling of the rocks and other scenery. Oh, and there's also the use of high resolution reflections and improved ambient occlusion too, which you can see here. Notice the extra level of clarity on the ground from Darth Maul's lightsaber as it reflects, and also note that there's less halos in the corners where objects meet, so both of these elements create a more natural presentation. Taken on their own, some of these effects you could say appear as more subtle refinements, but when grouped together, it's pretty obvious. There's a nice visual leap here, and it's something that definitely stands out during gameplay, whether that be the increased details across the textures or the extra level of physics-based particles. It looks great on consoles, but on PC, DICE has definitely taken this to the next level. And there's some good news here as well. You don't need ultra high-end hardware to run this game at 1080p 60 frames per second. Now, unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to do extensive GPU testing with the beta, but I did manage to grab quite a bit of time playing the game with our GTX 1060 in combination with an i5 6600K. And what can I say here? This setup is enough to give you a locked 60 frames per second at 1080p resolution while running with max settings. That's everything dialed up to the ultra preset, fixed resolution, so there's no dynamic frame buffer shenanigans here. And it looks and feels great to play. But perhaps what's more interesting is there's a lot of headroom here. Certainly enough to enable you to select 1080p resolution and then increase the resolution slider above 100% to enable super sampling. And of course you can enable dynamic resolution as well. That way you can essentially use the additional GPU headroom to increase image quality in less demanding scenes, while the frame rate should keep at a rock solid 60 frames per second. Essentially, these options allow you to use this otherwise wasted GPU power. Essentially, if you're running with VSync enabled, you'll basically be throwing away this extra level of performance, since the frame rate will be capped at 60 FPS. But using these display options allow you to get the full power out of your GPU, thus improving image quality in areas where it matters the most. Whereas in fast-paced action scenes where the screen is loaded with post-processing, the drop down to native 1080p, well, it's still going to look great there. Now, performance was great using the GTX 1060, although when I first started to play the game, I did notice something wasn't quite right. I kicked off playing the title using a GTX 1080 Ti, running at max settings at 1080p, in order to get the best possible capture footage, ensuring that we wouldn't get any frame rate drops before we did any extensive testing. But immediately I noticed some really pronounced stutters, primarily at the beginning of a match, but these would occasionally appear during gameplay as well, which was quite perplexing, seeing as the 1080 Ti is more than powerful enough to handle 1080p 60. Restarting the match helps smooth things over a little bit, but not completely. So what's going on here? Well, one possible cause could be the use of DirectX 12. There are two options here, DX11 and DX12, but the DX12 mode isn't fully supported, and indeed there's a little dialog box warning you that stability could be affected when using this mode. And it's possible that using this API is what was causing these stutters. After all, I didn't notice these stutters appearing when using the GTX 1060 in combination with the DirectX 11 mode. So based on this beta, if you'd like to get the best experience, I would select the DX11 mode, or at least make sure that that's the default mode selected when the final game arrives. That way you're guaranteed to get great performance and you're not going to be losing any visual quality. There are no additional effects gained from going with DX12 with this title. Anyway, that being said, Star Wars Battlefront 2 is shaping up to be an awesome experience on PC. It runs great on mid-range hardware, and if you've got a high-end setup like the GTX 1080 Ti, then well, 60 frames per second ultra settings, perhaps even 4K is likely. Certainly judging by our performance with the GTX 1060 at 1080p and how well Battlefield 1 runs at 4K using the GTX 1080 Ti, then I think 4K 60 is probably doable. And of course you're getting a better looking experience than on the current consoles. Of course, with the Xbox One X on the horizon, things could get interesting. Microsoft's console offers up significantly more GPU power than PS4 Pro, so I'd certainly be interested to see just how much of an upgrade we'll be getting here. Will DICE deliver full ultra settings and stick to lower resolutions below 4K, or will we be getting the full fat native 4K experience, but perhaps with settings more in line with consoles? We'll have to wait and see, but for now I think I'll leave it there. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed our content at Digital Foundry, and also be sure to check out our Patreon page at digitalfoundry.net and support us there, where you'll be able to find a high quality version of this video that really shows the benefits of 60 frames per second. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.